A seat that flipped the script in Michigan politics is back on the ballot in 2026, and the woman stepping up to fill it isn't walking, she's running headfirst into the fire. Welcome back to the Political Mike podcast, where the stakes are real, the voices are bold, and the conversation cuts through the noise. Now, if you've been following Michigan politics, you know the name Mallory McMorrow, and you know that she has announced recently that she's going to seek the the United States Senate seat left vacant. The fierce state senator, Mallory McMorrow, who stood on the Senate floor and called out hate, lies, and the politics of division, who took to the DNC this past summer with a huge copy of Project 2025 with clarity and courage. Well, this morning, we're joined by the woman who's aiming to carry that very torch forward in Michigan's 10th state Senate district, Amanda Treppa. She's fresh off a major campaign launch, stepping into a race that's about more than red versus blue. It's about values. It's about truth. It's about whether we meet this moment or let it pass us by. Amanda Treppa isn't just running for a seat. She's running to protect the promise of Michigan, the promise of America, for working families, for students, for the future we've been told we can't have. And she's here to tell us exactly why now is the time and why she's the one for this position. Amanda, thank you for being on the Political Mic.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that beautiful and stirring introduction. I truly appreciate you.
Tell us what made you decide that this is something that you want to do, that you are the person to fill in the void left by Mallory McMorrow.
It's a big void left by Mallory McMorrow. She's phenomenal. I'm very honored to have her as my state senator. I believe I'm the best person right now because we are at a point where there's a opportunity to shift forward, a generational shift that I think many of us have been speaking on, where we can actually progress, because I think we've kept trying to get by and not actually gotten better. And that's all I've seen my entire life on both professional circumstances, but also personal circumstances. And I do believe we need people who have resilient stories, who are prepared to stand in the fire and are comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's what I believe it calls for, and I can do that.
So, Amanda, you're stepping into a race for a district that helped redefine the tone of Michigan politics under McMorrow's leadership. What does it mean to carry that torch, and how do you build on the legacy in the newly drawn 10th district?
Building on that legacy, well, now the district has been redistricted. So how it has been has shifted, and it's going to now be Macomb and Oakland County. And I have roots in Macomb. That's where I was a foster child. That's where I was adopted. I live in Oakland County with my daughter, and where I have roots here as well. But being able to carry that torch, building on policies, amazing legislation that has been able to be progressed through the Senate, much of it thanks to Senator McMorrow herself, and being able to redefine, I think, what succession would kind of look like in our party when we are really taking leaders who are paying attention to the policies being introduced and already thinking 20 steps ahead, being strategic. I do believe that we have been throwing around the word pragmatic a lot for many, many years. And pragmatism has its place, but I think we need strategy more so, because that is a long-term goal. And that is looking at the policies and saying, okay, what do we do with this? Where do we want to go now? Not as opposed to appeasing, every time it's re-election season. We want our candidates and we want our elected officials to be in it all year round, not just election year round.
And so if you could walk us through some of the changes that go along with the district change, what are some of the political shifts that have taken place? Are there certain demographics that now have less or more power as a result of this newly drawn 10th congressional district?
Absolutely. Definitely our Black and brown communities are more represented. And I believe in genuine representation, and our leadership should reflect that, because representation matters and authenticity coming with that. And I do believe that something establishment-wise has been really looked down upon, that I've brought up quite a few times already going into this race. But I know who I'm looking up to, right? When I see amazing women in leadership, Black and brown women in leadership, like getting to see Kamala Harris run for president, like what that says to me, right? That tells me I get to stand on her shoulders one day and hopefully maybe get to do that myself, right? In whatever facet or policy or office, whatever it is. So I do believe that with the redistricting, these communities deserve to have genuine representation.
And so you're running during a time where, let's face it, a lot of young people, Gen Z, millennials, feel disillusioned politics. What do you say to the Gen Z voter who's asking, why should I care who represents my district in the 10th congressional district?
Sure. I totally understand why we're all feeling disillusioned. I'm disillusioned myself, but I also believe that there's more of us because we make up 65% of the workplace starting this year. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, Gen Z and millennials. And with that comes power. So you should care about how you can change your workplace, which then impacts your home life, which impacts your community. It all works together. And once you start to see that cycle and that pattern, you can make adjustments to it. And that's why we should care who we're putting in these places, who can be strategic, and how we're changing and redefining these cycles in order to actually move forward, since we will be the majority.
And, Michigan isn't just a battleground state. It's the crucible of the Democratic Party's future. We've got Bernie Sanders, Haley Stevens. I mentioned Mallory McMorrow. You have Abdul El Sayed, all defining different directions. A lot of folks have been complaining that the Democratic Party's messaging is not where it should be. You're entering this landscape as a candidate. What lane are you in, and what does your campaign say about where the Democratic Party is going?
The Democratic Party needs to find authenticity again. Plain and simple. The lack of authenticity, it's about progress, not perfection. That's what it should be. And I think the Republican Party has done a really good job of being strategic and not caring what we're doing. And it's worked. So at some point, you have to look at what somebody did that worked, who is sitting in a place of power, and go, what do we do next? What do we do maybe that was better than what they did? So I do believe we need to be authentic. We can't be afraid to mess up. We can't be afraid to have hard conversations. Everyone really loves to say, I'll have the hard conversations and give you a really great script, standardized answer. But what if you actually have the conversation and where you're going to feel the heat a little bit? Let the heat come. Let the heat build, because conflict happens, but then you get uncomfortable, but then progress actually happens. So we need authenticity. I don't like hearing the same old spiel from everyone. So it's very quickly, everyone who's starting to hop in races, you can see where it's lacking, and everyone knows it. I know it. And even when I've gone into endorsement panels recently, trying to say to organizations, this is why I should be the person, I say right away, I'm not going to have all the answers. And if I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you, but I'll find a way to go get it for you. And people are not used to someone actually admitting that, because I'm not going to know everything. No one is going to, but I'm willing to listen, and I'm actually willing to put my skills that I have mastered to the task that you need to get done.
So how do you balance between the local focus on things like clean water, education, infrastructure, with national expectations to take a stand on global flashpoints like Gaza, abortion rights, student loan debt cancellation? There's a fine line between, I guess, getting so nationally minded that you're losing the focus on where local concerns are. As a candidate running for state senate, how do you strike that balance?
Strike that balance by that, I think, is the beauty of the state senate and being a state legislative body. You already have really strong ties to your local community and your district, but you also know you have the ability to impact policy, especially in a place like Michigan, right? That is a focal point and is a pinnacle of our democracy right now and where we're headed, of being able to see how that impacts the state and then letting it run off from there. I am very invested in my communities here and the counties that I hope to represent, but being able to take care of the things they need to every day, like paying their bills, right? I can't focus if I can't pay my bills. I don't know about you. So making sure that they can come home at night, rest, bills are paid, that allows us then to focus on the larger picture and be able to then go on to a national level. But it's being able to say, I'm going to address this, but this is how I can tell you it's going to impact this. And then that's how you draw the line between the two. People have clarity, and then you can create policy that builds on the policies below.
So I'm curious, as someone who's, as a Michigander, what do you make of Governor Gretchen Whitmer's strategy? And, in a moment where most Democratic governors are defining themselves in direct opposition to this administration, the Trump administration's trade and economic agenda. She steps into the Oval Office and publicly acknowledges points of agreement. Does this signify a new model for pragmatic leadership in battleground states like Michigan, or she walked a tightrope between political opportunism and bipartisanship?
That is a great question, and I can feel my comms team sweating as I'm about to answer this. Obviously, I'm not Governor Whitmer, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for her. I will say I think it is a tightrope. I think it is a very tight rope that she's having to walk. I mean, we just had massive ice storms ravage the upper part of our state, and she still has to get funding for us, right? Like there's still work she has to get done. So at the end of the day, whether it's like her personal goals and whatever she's looking towards, she still has to do her job. So I believe it's a tightrope she's really trying to establish on how do we still get funding and not have to go do lawsuits every day, because people feel it instantly. They feel the instant impact right now with these executive orders. And I don't know if it's like a model, I would say per se, but I think it's a battle of survival right now. I think for every single governor and for anyone in leadership, everyone has entered, I think, a survival mode, whether it's trying to keep their seat, whether it's trying to do the best for their constituents. There is intense amount of fire and heat under everyone's seat.
And in an era where a lot of people are calling for new leadership, even in the United States Senate, where you have, folks that think that Chuck Schumer caved in too much to Donald Trump's budget demands. Where do you fit on the scale of, I guess, progressiveness? Do you believe, as many do, that someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez should be able to step into the breach to hold the line and not give or concede so much early on? Or do you think that the intricacies of budget negotiations can really make what seems like a simple caving in? It really there's really more complicated considerations behind this that need pragmatic and seasoned leadership to navigate.
I don't agree with Senator Chuck Schumer. I think that was not a wise choice at all. I think that there are times and moments that you need to be able to have a political prowess and recognize where you can redefine who you are as a party, who you are as a representative to the people. And that was one of those moments, and they blew it. Plain and simple. After everything everybody has been enduring since January, there was a moment to put a stop, because now we see, even yesterday, today, there's more executive orders coming down the line and directives and investigations, and it's chaos. You have a point that you can say, I don't want to be on this ride. Let's stop it for now. Everyone has a choice. And I think the whole, I'm being pragmatic in the budget, it's still a choice you made. I don't think it was the right one strategically, because you had a moment to actually seize some power back and say, we're still here. We still have an opportunity to fight back, and then demand you come meet us in the middle at the table.
So you have Mike Rogers announcing that he's going to be running for the Senate as well.
Mm-hmm.
He's re-entering the political arena at a time when the Republican Party has turned a sharp corner towards MAGA and Trumpism. What does it mean for Michigan and the country at large when a former House Intel chair who once criticized Trump is now branding himself as a Trump ally? Because if you rewind to 2015, Mike Rogers left Congress as a national security hawk, one of the few with serious cyber security credentials. Now, fast forward to the present, he's tying his political comeback to the man who called Putin's election interference a hoax.
Yeah, I think it sounds like the Republican Party, to be quite frank. J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, said the same thing at one point, right? Criticizing Donald Trump. So I think it's just typical, again, battle of survival right now, survival of the fittest. And he's picking what he thinks is the winning horse right now. If he's actually living in Michigan right now, that's great that he's at least making that move, because that didn't happen during his last race. So I'll be curious to see how it plays out. I don't see a path forward for him, and wish him the best.
As a candidate in the upcoming 2026 midterms, how concerned are you about efforts to undermine the right to vote in your state? You have the recent attempt by Republicans, the SAVE Act, of course, that would require now, folks to have a passport. And of course, if women who go through marriages change their name, That opens up a whole new can of complication, in addition to the fact that 50% of the population don't have passports. So what does this mean for you as a candidate looking to have a fair shot at this particular seat here?
For me as a candidate, it's working with a lot of organizations. Like luckily, I work at a great organization that does grassroots outreach, and there are others building coalitions to do voter education. But I will tell you, in the state of Michigan, and I will stand 10 toes down on this, has an outstanding Secretary of State department that is just, it's the best department in the state. I'm willing to swear on it. There's the processes in place that all of these things have been addressed already. Like I know from even recently getting my driver's license renewed, how somebody stops you at the door, takes you through the process. Do you have this documentation? You have to show things in order to get your driver's license renewed or to have one in the first place, right? So I think it's ludicrous that they're going through these extreme hoops. I do have confidence we can try to build the best case we can here in Michigan to make people feel confident when they're going to the ballot box, but really voter outreach and voter education, because there's so much misinformation right now. Like if you start just scrolling, right, doom scrolling all day, I'm like, oh, did that really happen? Is that really real? Oh, can I not do that? But I am concerned that, people are going to get stressed about finances and buying a passport, buying documentation, and depending on where you are, can you easily get to places that can help you or to resources? So I have some concern, but I am feeling really confident in our leadership that they've done a really good job making sure that we'll be set up for success.
And John James, who recently ran for the Senate, was unsuccessful, frames his new run for governor of Michigan as a return to common sense. But he's aligning himself with the president, whose economic record, let's face it, with these tariffs, his legal woes, his disregard for federal court orders, and divisive rhetoric continue to polarize the nation. What exactly does common sense mean, do you think, in this context? And who does it serve, as we're looking at how Michigan is served by state, local, and national leadership?
I think common sense, as John James would define it, serves John James. I was raised in Sterling Heights, Michigan, after I was adopted, an area that he represents. And I don't believe he is a strong leader. I don't believe common sense, it's not so common to John James. And I get very frustrated. You can feel it. You can see it right now in me. Anytime he just believes I'm here, so I just make sense. And I'm like, well, you can't even show up to your town halls. So that's cute that you think it just makes sense and there's common sense. It's just making the assumption that people can't think for themselves. He's essentially calling people dumb. That's what I believe he's doing when he says common sense. He's saying you don't have common sense enough to realize that, like, I really am it, or really not realize that there are better people out there because we have much better candidates than John James. If John James can do more than be one term in Congress or actually win more races, maybe I'd have an ounce of respect for him and if he could show up for his congressional district. But honestly, I don't know why he's running. I couldn't tell you. And I think it's something that he should sit out.
In terms of your outreach efforts, because let's face it, Michigan is a purple state. Michigan is, especially in recent elections, is you can't get to the White House without going through Michigan. How do you reach out to folks who voted for Donald Trump in your district? They don't like what they're seeing. The polls are reflecting a precipitous downfall. Even Fox News reported that he's the first president in recent history to have this low of an approval rating before he even reaches the 100-day mark. How do you address or reach out to those specific constituents who did vote for Donald Trump, who put their faith in Donald Trump, but now you're trying to convince them that, hey, there's a new agenda that I want you to subscribe to, and the agenda that I want you to subscribe to is diametrically opposed to what Trump is proposing here? How do you really reach out to those folks?
Addressing things such as price of groceries, price of gas, what's going on in their local communities. Has any of that changed? Because I think he ran a lot on scare tactics and fear mongering that, like, I can be the only one who can make all the inflation go away. I'm the only one who can make life a little bit easier in your schools and this and that, and trying to do a really unhealthy trickle down effect. But has it actually happened? I don't think we can say it has, right? So being able to walk up and say, hey, what is impacting you today? Like, what is stressing you out when you leave for work in the morning? What keeps you up at night? What keeps you up at night? I can help with. Let's start there. It's keeping you up that we don't have paid maternity leave in our state that hits a certain marker. Okay, let's talk about it. Is that what's stopping you from like really feeling like you can do this as a mom, or what you want to achieve? Like, let's have those conversations. And Donald Trump can't do that. He can't address things like that because those are things that really happen. And Donald Trump doesn't know what things really happen to everyday people, completely out of touch. So just speaking to that, because I am a regular person, I have a normal 9 to 5. I'm a single mom. I have my beautiful daughter. We live here. I live in a lovely home, but I rent. I'm renting to own. So also, like a lot of my generation, millennials, like we rent still. I don't think there's a lot of elected officials who rent. I'm just throwing that out there. I know, actually, no, AOC does back in New York, but a lot of people don't. So being able to meet them where they're at by actually being one of them.
What are some issues that are facing constituents in the 10th district that you think that the nation should be aware about? What are some of the most prominent concerns in your community that you think voters are going to be voting on when they go to the polls?
I think they're most concerned right now about their work. Right now, their work, there's a lot of layoffs happening, lots of budgetary issues, a lot of caused by Donald Trump's tariffs, so on and so forth. And I think people are feeling really unsafe in the workplace as far as if they're going to have a job tomorrow, right? How that's going to impact their children. School funding is a massive one. And how do we navigate that? How do we have thinkers who are strategic sitting in Lansing who can, get creative, and then also be fair across the board to make sure that every child has a shot at an amazing education, make sure that every person feels safe going into their workplace and know that they're going to have a job at the end of the day, and that their leadership feels supported. So those are the really pressing issues right now. And we're going to see how it plays out. But I don't believe that as we go all the way through the federal level, people are really in touch with it. But that's what I can affect in the state Senate here.
So the DCCC unveiled an ambitious target list zeroing in on 35 Republican-held seats in Michigan. I know you're running for state Senate, but this includes deep red districts that Trump carried by double digits in the state. Mm-hmm. It's not cautious, it's aggressive. Is this a bet on a backlash against extremism, or is this the most underrated map in modern midterm history?
Most underrated map by far. Let's look at Florida, right? What just happened. Gay Vallimont, who I love and adore so much, and how she even though it wasn't the outcome we were hoping for, how she flipped some counties that hadn't flipped in decades, right? So I think this is an underrated map. These are places that we just haven't invested in before. It is a massive opportunity, and I do believe we can go in and flip them. You just have to put the time, the effort, and you have to listen to the people there. Because lots of times when you talk to people in very red areas, right? Even Sterling Heights, where I grew up, is very red, but I have a lot of support coming from those people right away from my launch, and said, like, I will be voting for you though, like if I could, or telling their friends to vote for me in this district. But it's because I actually go in and listen. You need people who are willing to go in and have the hard conversations and listen and actually show us this is who a Democrat is. We're kind, we're empathetic, we give a damn. We give a damn when we show up. We need to show up, and we haven't showed up in those places. And that's what I think the outcome will be, with some really great flips.
And the economic populism that a lot of the candidates seem to be leaning in, the tying of Elon Musk with Donald Trump, the imagery of the billionaires at the inauguration. How does this play into your strategy? Are folks responsive to this, or is this just something that folks in the Beltway think is effective, and it's not really something that really gets traction out in mainstream political territories like where you are?
Yeah, I think it only goes so far. To be quite frank, most people that I'm talking to don't care about Elon Musk. They don't care. Like, they get it. They're kind of over it. We've heard the rhetoric. We understand there's billionaires. We know they're there. Now, what are you going to do about it? No one really cares. No one wants the hype train. Nobody wants to see that. My strategy is to say, we know they're there, but this is what I can do for you. Despite that, this is what I can do to fight back. This is what I can do to push back here in Michigan against whatever shenanigans they're throwing every single day at us, a million times a day. And I think that's what people should be focusing on more so, is like, how are you going to combat it? We want action. We want to know that you care each day. I know he's there. I can look on X. I can look on Instagram. I know it. So move on. Show me what you're going to do.
So we've got a long way to go. The campaign just started. What are some of the things that your campaign is going to focus on in the early months of this endeavor to really solidify your messaging with voters? You only get a one time to make a good first impression, and as a candidate, you really want to take control of the narrative before you're defined by your opponents. What are some of the things that you want your constituents to know about Amanda Treppa as a candidate for the Senate to represent Michigan's 10th district in the state Senate?
Being able to be out in the community right now is quintessential. I'm already in the community quite a bit, but being involved in the fact that people know I'm approachable. I feel like people have been gatekept from their elected officials and leadership, even as far as process. There's kind of like I'm here, you're there. And no, we're all on the same playing field. And being able to be out knocking doors, going to really helpful events, not so much like events where you're having pancakes with other local electeds. I just don't, that's not where the people are. The people are out at events where they're trying to get resources, right? This coming weekend, I'll be at an event where people are looking at legal reform and getting expungement services and so on and so forth. So being able to talk about actual changes that we can make or that I can help support them and impact them while serving in the state Senate. I'm approachable always and full access. People can DM me. They do all the time on Instagram and on Twitter. So that should be the difference between myself and I think what we've had for a very long time. And I do believe that our current state senator has done a really good job of that herself.
So the Michigan State House has been busy. The Michigan State House has been busy. You had a bill that was particularly aimed at addressing high crime areas. The Michigan House of Representatives passed legislation on April 22nd to increase police funding that gives priority to places dealing with the highest number of violent crimes in the state. And the bill passed 104-4, a near unanimous vote in this hyperpolarized age. What does that say about the political calculus behind police funding in Michigan right now? What do you think that consensus reflects public sentiment or political pressure?
I wouldn't so much say political pressure, but I do believe it works in tandem with a lot of the community bills that we're also trying to pass, community intervention bills, excuse me, that we're trying to pass as well. So I think you can't necessarily have one without the other, and being able to support resources, but then also having community and violence and prevention and all those resources and social work happening in tandem with each other. That's what I'm hoping for the outcome of that. Because like I said, I don't think you can have one without the other.
And the bill allocates $115 million annually, with $72 million going directly to local police, but only $1.5 million is earmarked for community violence intervention programs. Is that a ratio that's in alignment with your vision of effective public safety policy?
No. I do believe there needs to be, I think there's disparities. I also believe that the House is working, right? It's a Republican majority. So I believe it's also trying to take wins where we can get them. That being said, there is a way, again, strategically, to keep building and putting things in place to really even out the landscape and the inequities between the two. Ideally, no, we would have a lot more funding go into communities as opposed to directly into the forces, because I do believe the social work and a lot of the bills that I even was a part of during the last legislative process in December before lame duck that I helped vouch for, where we had people going in for gun violence prevention. A lot more funding needs to be put into those programs because they actually work. We've seen it work there. We've seen it work in the city of Detroit. That clearly has been a great model, and we should be leaning more on that. And I would aim to do that in the state Senate.
And campaign finance is another important area. There was a bipartisan bill package introduced to block political contributions from Michigan's largest utilities, and it sparked a significant debate. What do you think this legislation could mean for the balance of power between corporations and the average voter in Michigan?
It would be amazing because we would actually feel like we have a voice and a shot. Um, Especially, I can tell you, being a candidate now, right? On the other side, you really see how much influence that these corporations have and how they easily want to approach you and be like, if we do this, you can walk here, you can walk there. But then you look at your communities and you're like, wow, this is why we're not getting ahead every single time. And it would mean a lot for all of us to actually feel like we can compete, because right now it's people competing with corporations, which doesn't make any sense. Also, because some of us work for those corporations. So that's when I'd say that I'm really running on addressing the vicious cycles that we have in place. This is a vicious cycle and it needs to be broken.
And polls reflect that many people in Michigan share your view. You know, nonprofits by nonprofits funded by utilities like Citizens for Energizing Michigan's Economy and Michigan Energy First play a significant role in shaping elections and political discourse. Should Michigan consider broader reforms to limit nonprofit political spending in general, or should we just focus specifically on corporate-backed nonprofits?
It's a really great question. I think purview-wise, I would say corporate more so, because nonprofits are already so underfunded as it is. And, working at one myself, you have to really work hard to find funders, to find grants. And grants are drying up everywhere right now with the current federal administration, right? Because a lot of nonprofits, we are targets because of DEI, which has become, their buzzword. And I believe that the corporate are able to navigate that, corporately backed, a lot more than the smaller ones can. And I think if we even that playing field as well, maybe we'll finally get some pushback, and maybe we'll see that again trickle up to the lovely federal administration, and they'll back off a little bit, because you've got to impact one to then cause a domino effect to impact the other.
And speaking of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, Michigan, of course, we know the Trump administration has taken a hatchet to anything related to diversity, equity, and inclusion employment initiatives. Michigan typically has over 75,000 federal workers. With the Trump administration's ongoing efforts to downsize the federal government, to take a hatchet to DEI, how do you anticipate this will impact Michigan's economy, especially in counties where federal workers make up a significant portion of the workforce?
It's going to continue to devastate communities, truly, because when people don't have money, right? I mean, they're not going to spend it at local businesses. It's going to impact business owners. How does that impact the family, your kids going to school, the stress of trying to, again, get by day to day? What's keeping you up at night? Because if it happens in one household, it's going to impact the one next door. It all works together. So it's going to continue to devastate our communities, and there needs to be a stop to it. It's reckless, it's careless, and lacks all empathy that beyond understanding.
And, with the potential for continued mass layoffs, what specific challenges do you see arising in federally funded programs within Michigan, particularly in areas like veteran services or environmental research?
In veteran services, in particular, already we're seeing huge issues where, especially with like nurse layoffs and people not being able to get appointments, being able to get their meds that have a schedule to them. It's not like it's something casual, it's medication. People need this. So we're going to continue to see that fallout, but it's affecting people's health. And like people can die if they do not have the care they need. And that is directly impacting our veterans right now, people who serve and put their lives on the line, that we really as a country have failed time and time again. And we need to do better across the board. And environmental, everything that's being spewed from the federal government, again, is landing on everyone with misinformation, and all of a sudden pulling back protections and water and so on and so forth. It's going to just continue to ravage communities, and it'll affect people's health. But if they can't go to the doctors, if they're a veteran, see how the cycles continue. So.
And of course, environmental research as well. That's something that's also going to take a huge blow. How do you see this impacting Michiganders in particular?
Well, our state is amazing environmentally, right? And the lack of research is really going to cause destruction through so many organizations that have worked so hard to make progress over the last several decades here in Michigan. And I think it's also going to cost jobs for those organizations. And just is going to cause like all of these things that they want us to be focusing on, right? They just want to cause this chaos. And if you in fact affect every part of research in order to make things better, then we keep having to get by, right? So again, you won't get better.
You know, the State Representative Jay DeBoyer, following the weaponization of state government subcommittee hearing, suggested that the growing discontent with state government is why voters put Republicans back in control of the House. Do you think this sentiment will influence upcoming elections, particularly in the context of the tension between state departments and the legislative branch?
I don't believe that for 1 second, and I don't believe we're going to see that happen. I think we are going to be able to take back the House and the Senate, keep the Senate, I should say, and I think that's very misguided. I think that we just didn't show up to the best of our ability and invest the way we should have and more strategically. And I think once we do that, we're going to be able to really stand up and represent as a Democratic Party in the House. And I think that's a very cocky sentiment at that.
And of course, the balance between concerns for public health and personal freedom has been another topic for this subcommittee. Carl Mankey and Marlena Pavlos Hackney testified about their defiance of COVID-19 regulations. How do you balance the importance of personal freedom against the need for public health measures like these, particularly in the case of businesses defying state orders?
I think back to, COVID and everything. So I spent part of that time in New York City because that's where I was living at the time, and I saw the really, really dark side of COVID. I saw people's bodies being dragged, on York Avenue to the trucks. I experienced, losing half of my building to COVID. So even when I hear that sentiment, and then I came to Michigan after I was vaccinated and whatnot, came to Michigan, the protocols that were put in place here. And what I think people have to understand is we're always doing the best with what we have to work with information wise at the end of the day. And when you make choices to defy because you feel personally attacked, that makes me concerned as far as leadership on how we're demonstrating what it means to actually have empathy and to put in perspective for folks why we're doing what we're doing. I think there is a balance, but I also think it's leading by example, really, at the end of the day. If I say, hey, listen, like I have mental health things and I struggled during shutdown. It was really, really painful. I wanted to defy everything that I could, truly. But then being able to see certain leaders do the same thing and then try to talk through it or try to provide what they could gave me that little bit of hope and a little bit of inspiration. And I think there's an approach to explain why we do things. I think as a party, we really don't do well at explaining why. We are very good at telling you what to do. This sounds great, putting it in a box, but can you just explain why you're doing it? And why do you, Amanda, why are you staying home? Why are you going to go ahead and follow these rules? I'm going to follow these rules because I believe in not taking a chance that somebody could die. I just do. Like, that's why I, Amanda, listen, right? And I think people need to hear that from their leaders. That's one of those things that I think we have to redefine here in Michigan is how our leadership shows up. Who shows up and how that sets the tone for everyone else. Because if they're saying, oh, people are mad, and they see their leaders saying that, okay, well, maybe I should be mad. Maybe that's what I should think. But if they see their leaders actually saying, hey, I'm here with you in it, we're going to have the empathy, we're going to have the grace, and we're going to figure it out together as opposed to just lashing out everywhere, we can set a new tone.
And that's a good point, because I always said if Donald Trump came out with a whole new slew of MAGA masks, instead of making the mask a symbol of division, a symbol of submission, make it a symbol of patriotism, people would be wearing masks probably till this day. And so, it just goes to show you that, in addition to what I think is the cultish mindset, I mean, people do want leadership in times of crisis to demonstrate that sacrificing or giving something up is not just something for the sake of doing it, but it's actually meaningful. President Trump is returning to Michigan to celebrate his 100th day in office.
Yeah.
And Macomb County, your district, was a key area for Trump in the 2024 election, where he won double digits. With the state playing a pivotal role in the upcoming election cycle, the 2026 midterms, do you think his return to your area, to your region, will help solidify support for him and his agenda, or do you think it could deepen divides among Michiganders?
I don't think it will solidify for him at all. I think people are feeling the impact already of his erratic policies and directives. We see it at all these protests that are happening almost daily out here in Oakland, in Macomb County. There are immense amount of people out there, standing out there saying, please leave my Social Security alone. Don't touch my Medicaid. Because they're getting scared, because again, how he's acting is so erratic and not even what he promised. And now that suddenly like the wool has been, lifted over people's eyes, it's going to be really interesting to see how he comes back. I don't believe he's going to be really warm received. And I don't think it's going to divide people. I think it's eye-opening for folks to realize that even the people that you believe in all the way, even in that cultish mindset, quote unquote, can disappoint you. So what do you do now? Who do you look to now? And that's when I speak about how there is a moment right now and there's a shift, a generational shift that we can do in a political landscape. That's what I'm talking about, where both sides are seeing that, okay, well, a lot of these people just really aren't great. What do we do? How do we actually get to choose? Because we do get a choice. And I think we have been fed that we don't have a choice. These are going to be your two people. This is going to be your selection. We'll see you at the finish line. No, we have a say. We have a say. We have an opportunity to tell people how primaries work. We have an opportunity to explain this is the process. There are so many people who don't even know they're going to be redistricted into my district until I was just telling them recently. I was like, no, I am running for your vote. I'm like, you're part of this district. So getting out there and explaining that in Macomb County, in Warren, in Centerline, and so on and so forth, they're starting to really see, oh, I have options. And understanding like, okay, you're willing to come tell me that you're trying to be my representative. And you want to also educate me on A, B, C, and D, because it's not just about me. It's about making sure that everyone can see the whole picture. If we can have actual leadership that shows the whole picture instead of always making it about just themselves, we can have progress for once, I think, in this next upcoming election cycle.
And going back to Governor Whitmer just a little bit, she expressed concerns that Trump's tariffs on vehicles and auto parts would disproportionately hurt Michigan, especially given the state's heavy reliance on the auto industry. Do these tariffs concern you in the same way? Do you think the economic impact of these tariffs will be a major point of contention in Michigan's political landscape leading up to 26?
Absolutely. An enormous, like no one's exaggerating that. The governor hits it right on the head. It's very stressful. You hear it from our union workers. You hear it from our communities. And I'm concerned, right? I would love to get a new car soon. That'd be really great. Everyone would love to have an opportunity to have a vehicle, and all these tariffs across the board are just going to add stress to an already stressful situation. We went into this election cycle. People were saying, this is where I'm at. I feel financially strapped. I feel stressed. And they went to someone who said, I've got it on lock, and just made it worse. And Michigan is feeling it. We're taking the brunt of it. And that's why I said, back to your question from earlier about the tightrope that I believe Governor Whitmer is having to walk, because we want to be able to lead and have courage to be able to maybe stand in that room and say, okay, like this is what I need to get done today. But then also I'm going to call you out and say, this is what you're also going to do to my entire state, because everyone relies on this industry. Everyone relies on their jobs, their families, their communities. And all of us, like I grew up with an adoptive parent who worked for Chrysler, right? Everyone can you can just breathe and you find someone who is part of our amazing automotive industry here in Michigan. So I believe that what you're hearing, the alarms ringing, are tried and true. I don't believe them to be exaggerated for 1 second.
So as a closing question, Ms. Treppa, for those who maybe they're not, partisans They just want constant leadership. They're, in your view, they are feeling the effects of the Trump administration already, and it's giving them grief because we're only in April, and we've got until November of 2028 to at least make any change at who actually is leading the executive branch. They're looking at how the rule of law is being trampled upon. Federal court orders are making decisions that are being disregarded. Due process is being ignored. We talked about the impact that tariffs have on regular folks.
Yeah.
And then here you come along and you say, well, give me a shot at the state Senate. And they've heard this before from other candidates who promised to go in there and shake things up, to go in there and promote common sense proposals. And they're a little bit disillusioned. They're a little bit, their faith is waning. How do you win the confidence of those kinds of folks who have become so turned off by politics?
I start by saying that I love the fact that I have spent my entire life not doing things by the rules and doing them the typical way, because that's what we need now. I think a lot of people have shown up even at my door saying, hey, I can do more, and I can use this process that we've used, and I've done this before. And I'm sitting here looking at it, and I'm like, I can see your work now, and here we are. I'm not really seeing much. And I think even with having the trifecta, we got some great work done, but we could have gone further. And who's not going to be afraid to take some big steps and take a little heat by saying, hey, why didn't we go further? Let's try it this time. What do we have to lose? For me personally, especially going in, my life has not been simple. My foster care journey, to even where I was adopted, where I grew up, in a very red area, to my own recovery and postpartum depression, and really bouncing back from that. I have seen what it's like to be at the rock bottom. I have seen what it's like to be all the way at the top. And at this point in my life, I have nothing to lose because I'm not going to get to take this with me. So what can I give back to everyone else, and also give back to my daughter and to everyone else? And I don't think our politicians think that way. They think, how can I get through to the next year and the next and stay in my job? Because someone said, what if you don't win? What do? I go to work. I go to work. I go to work like everybody else, because it does not take always a title. It's not about the title for me. The title comes with the power to affect change. That's why I would like to run for this seat that has that particular title, because I also know how to affect change without it. And we need to start looking for people who do it without the title, because they can actually make real progress once they have it.
And for those who want to donate or contribute to your campaign in any way, where can they go?
Yes, we have a lovely secure Act Blue link that you can find that right on my Instagram profile. If you click the links right at the top. We are excited. We are getting off the ground right now. So any donations, any contributions that you can contribute, we thank you.
Amanda Treppa, Democratic candidate for Michigan's 10th district for the state Senate. It's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the Political Mic. You've got a vision, you've got an agenda, and you've got the energy and the drive and the passion and the backstory to propel you forward. So I wish you all the best in your endeavor. And the Political Mic is always open to you whenever you want to come back on.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you and this platform and everyone out there.
With that being said, that's going to conclude this episode of the Political Mic podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Hi, it's Mike Taylor, the host of the Political Mic podcast. If you like what you heard tonight, I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I also want to ask you to please follow along on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and Amazon Music. You can also follow along and keep up with the conversation through our Telegram channel. Follow us on Twitter at @ThePolyMic, and follow us on Instagram. Thank you so much, and no matter what part of the political spectrum that you fall on, I want to encourage you to stay engaged Stay a part of the conversation and stay informed. Thank you.